Oh, Dan Jenkins' car is on this call. Yeah, it popped up. Pastor John Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Can you mute yourself? We hear the conversation.
So, good evening, everyone. We'll get started in approximately 1 minute while people are joining the meeting.
Dang, I can't pick this thing up. Well, we can't. That's I can hardly pick this up.
No.
Listen, yeah.
Hey, Miss Luke, I think you're.
Good evening, Alderman.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's get started. So welcome. My name is Sophia King. I'm the alderman of the 4th Ward. Tonight we are going to have a presentation on the Carnotite removal from the Michael Reese site. A couple things I want to note. First of all, we had, over 100 folks who were interested in joining this presentation, and we have elevated some of those folks to a participant status so that we can have just real-time conversation about this particular remediation, and also to answer your questions directly. And so we actually did it, pretty objectively. We raised people to participant status who lived between 35th to 25th and the lake to Michigan. So folks who lived, nearest and adjacent to the particular site, those are the folks who we elevated so that we could have a very direct conversation. We also had questions that were submitted beforehand, so we will get to some of those questions first. And also I'd like to recognize that we have a number of members who are present from the Michael Reese Advisory Committee. I'd like to acknowledge them. They have been, working on the Michael Reese development now called Bronzeville Lakefront for some time, but they also obviously are concerned about the Carnotite removal and remediation, and so they are here tonight with us. We've got Mrs. Pope from the Michael Reese Advisory Committee. We've got Mr. Orr from the Michael Reese Advisory Committee, Mr. Stansel, Dr. Clark, Mr. McGee, and I thought I heard somebody say that Ms. Carr was on the call as well. I see Pastor Smith, so a number of people from the advisory committee are here. If I see them, I will definitely acknowledge them because they've been working on the Michael Reese development for some time. Now we're calling it, we're trying to socialize a new name, which is Bronzeville Lakefront. And so they'll be here asking questions as well. So now I'd like to introduce Kimberly, are you taking lead for this
Yeah.
presentation?
Yes, it'll
Yeah,
be
so
Abby and I.
Okay, so Miss Worthington and Miss Mazza. I also see Miss Rubik, who I want to acknowledge, who's been working on the Michael Reese development on behalf of the city, on behalf of Commissioner Cox and Mayor Lori Lightfoot. So I see her here tonight as well. Just want to acknowledge her. So without further ado, Ms. Worthington and Ms. Mazza, I will hand it over to you. You will do the presentation and then we will take questions. We'll take a number of questions that were presented ahead of time first. I'll defer to my advisory committee members for questions that they have. And then we'll go to people who have been elevated to panelists, but we'll also take questions that you submit in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll try and get to as many of the questions as we can. Some of them become redundant, and so if your question has been answered, feel free to let us know that. But without further ado, Ms. Worthington, Ms. Mazza, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Alderman King, and thank you for all of your help on this, and Prentice as well. I'm Kimberly Worthington. I'm the Deputy Commissioner over the Environmental Health and Safety Group. We're housed in the Department of Assets, Information, and Services. And I'm here today with Abby Mazza. She's one of our environmental engineers that's been working on this project. And we're here to provide you with information on the upcoming soil removal project that will be performed over the next 12 to 18 months in a portion of the site that is currently fenced in at the northern end of the Bronzeville Lakefront. And we'll be telling you what is happening and why and what you can expect to see and when. And we've tried to anticipate the questions that we were given in advance. So hopefully we've addressed a lot of those in our presentation. Next slide, please. So why is this happening? So for about 5 years, starting in 1916, a radium processing facility operated near what is now 434 East 26th Street. That was known as the Carnotite Reduction Company. And the area later became part of the Michael Reese Hospital campus that's shown in red. And the green area at the top is where the Carnotite site we think was located. The Carnotite company left behind soil materials that were contaminated with low levels of radioactive radium, uranium, and thorium. And during their operations, they brought uranium ore, which was called carnotite, and that was their primary raw material which they extracted radium for medical purposes and scientific purposes. But then they were left with a bunch of material left over, and the uranium would have been a waste product along with thorium, which is related to decaying uranium. So they just kind of threw it out their back door, we're guessing. So in 1979, in 2009, and in 2013, different state agencies, including Illinois Emergency Management Agency and the Illinois Department of Public Health, determined that there was no immediate health hazard to folks in the area. And even though the city is not responsible for creating the contamination, because we own the property, it is our responsibility to remediate it, to further protect human health and the environment, and return the property to productive use for the community. Next slide. So what has been happening? In 2009, that is when the city acquired the site, thinking we were going to put the Olympic Village there. I was very upset to see that not happen, but and that's when we also found out about the radioactive material after we purchased it. So we implemented at that time a radiation monitoring program that is similar to the one that is used in the Streeterville neighborhood. They have thorium up there. And so now there's a city ordinance that covers both areas, and it requires monitoring during any subsurface work to ensure that workers and residents are protected. And then from 2009 to 2013, IEMA, the US EPA, and the city conducted multiple investigations to identify and delineate the radioactive materials that were on the site. In 2010, that was the first time we came to the neighborhood to talk about the radiological conditions when we were just starting to sample. We wanted people to understand why we were sampling and what we were looking for. And that was about the same time of the Michael Reese building demolition. And then in 2015, that is when IEMA issued the license for the site, or it's like a permit. And that was for the city to begin the formal decommissioning or removal process for this radiological material. And that license required quarterly environmental monitoring, which also started in 2015. And then in 2020, we mailed out a project fact sheet. We had had a website for a while, but we updated that. The fact sheet went out to the community area in preparation for the 2021 removal process for the remediation project. And also in 2020, we issued the construction bid for the remediation work. Next slide, please. So this environmental monitoring that we did over quite a long period, this map shows the outline of the site as well as the different points where we, did sampling. The first set of items that we were sampling for was the air particulates, groundwater, sewer sediment, and sewer water. And we monitored those quarterly and found the radiological levels below the concentrations of concern that were set by the state agency, IEMA. We also monitored for passive gamma radiation and radon to evaluate any cumulative exposures to the public. And this monitoring started in October of 2015 and has continued to this day and will continue through the remediation. And the results to date are below the maximum dose limits that have been set by IEMA as well. So we have a nice baseline prior to beginning our work. Next slide, please. So what is going to be happening? So we have the remediation project overview. You guys are recognizing the shape of the site now. And the primary goals of the project are to protect human health and the environment, fulfill regulatory requirements, and eliminate a significant barrier to redevelopment of the site. And simply put, the city's contractor is going to excavate radiologically contaminated soil from the site, truck the soils to offsite disposal locations very far away, and backfill the hole with clean fill. It sounds easy, but it's a complicated material. So the project will be funded up to $31 million from both a bond issuance as well as TIF sources to pay for the construction contractor, the environmental health and safety oversight consultants, as well as some contingency funds we have in there in case they're needed. As part of the construction bid, the minority and local resident participation goals were set, and we're going to be working closely with the Alderman's office so that we exceed these goals for the construction contract. And the contract requires too many words with C. The contract requires the construction contractor to hold at least 2 job fairs in the community to help meet these goals. Go to the next slide. So let's look at where the contaminated soil is. So you can see where the plume is. This is an aerial view of the site. And it also shows on the bottom half a side view of the site. And the radium is depicted in yellow. The thorium is blue, and the uranium is orange. So you can see the material is kind of mixed up all over the site there. And the depth of contamination ranges from 6 feet at the south end all the way to 14 feet towards the north end. You can see how it dips down there with the uranium. We expect approximately 17,400 cubic yards of material are expected to be removed. And the cleanup criteria that we'll be following were set by IEMA, and it takes into account the presence of the background concentrations, because all of these materials do occur naturally in the environment. Next slide, please. So after the soil is removed, we're going to restore the site. And the map shows the aerial view, and the excavation area in orange will be backfilled with stone to the existing grade, CA6. And then the green area that's shown will be a vegetated bioswale, and that will be constructed to manage any stormwater from the site. That's just required for any projects that disturb land over a certain size. And the 26th Street will be closed at the start of the remediation, and it will remain closed until redevelopment plans are finalized and constructed. So we're going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Abby at this point.
Thanks. So we want to talk about remediation oversight because it's a critical component of this project. And there are 2 main types of oversight. There'll be the regulatory as well as our own contractual oversight. So as part of the construction bid that was put out at the end of last year, we included over 200 pages of technical specifications that the contractor is going to have to follow. And prior to the beginning of remediation, IEMA must review and approve the contractor's detailed construction plans and procedures. So they will be reviewed and approved by them before we start any work. Also during remediation, IEMA, the city's Department of Public Health, as well as our oversight consultant, Tetra Tech, and our radiation safety officer will be on site at different times during the work to ensure that these approved construction plans and procedures are being followed. The city has hired Tetra Tech to provide remediation oversight on a daily basis during the work. The radiation safety officer will also be on site during all excavation and loading activities to monitor for compliance with the IEMA approved plans and procedures. Activities will be also logged with photographs during the duration. And in addition, we'll also have a project email and phone number for the public that will be monitored during the field work if the public identifies anything of concern that we should be looking into. Lastly, and importantly, IEMA, CDPH, AIS, Tetra Tech, and the RSO all have authority to stop work, the contractor's work, at any time if we deem it necessary, if there's any issues with following any of the planned, approved plans and procedures. Next slide, please. So during the remediation, there will be air monitoring conducted, and air monitoring devices like these shown in the photos will be used, and they will be located at both the edge of the excavation, referred to as the work area, as well as along the perimeter of the site. Both the oversight consultant, Tetra Tech, and our remediation contractor will be conducting work area monitoring, and then Tetra Tech, as our oversight consultant, will be responsible for the perimeter monitoring, which is what's used for the community safety. The perimeter dust monitoring will be conducted at 4 locations using continuous direct read equipment, and results will be evaluated in real time. The monitoring locations may change as work progresses so that they are placed where best to monitor on-site activities. Community action levels for dust are based on the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, and these are an average annual concentration over 3 years. So any one trigger or set of triggers to these action levels does not mean that there's an immediate unsafe condition at the site. Perimeter monitoring results will be made available regularly on the city's website in an easy to understand format. And if either a work area or a perimeter action level is reached, work will stop in order to determine the source or the cause of that exceedance, and also to determine what additional dust suppression measures need to be implemented accordingly. Next slide, please. So in addition to the dust monitoring, to the air monitoring, there's just also general dust protection measures that are going to be implemented from the beginning. These will be required, and they are going to be reviewed and approved by both the IEMA and the city prior to the contractor starting work. The control measures can include water misting, crusting. There'll be shade cloth on the perimeter fencing. Trucks and stockpiles will be tarped and covered to eliminate dust or reduce dust. Vehicles will have to go at reduced speeds when needed, and there will be a wheel washer. Dust generating activities such as concrete or asphalt removal, soil excavation, soil blending, or soil loading will also cease during periods of adverse weather as well. Next slide, please. Next slide. There should be a truck.
I apologize. Give me just a second.
Sure, no worries.
Phone call came in and threw off the presentation.
I could describe what should be there.
Here it comes. I apologize. Technical difficulties. All right.
Perfect, thanks. Oh.
This is
One more. There should be one more back.
No, actually, this is not the right one, I don't think. Is this it?
It should be, this might be, we did reorder at the end. There should be a truck route slide. There we go. Yep, right here. Okay, great.
There you go.
Thank you. So this, the expected primary truck route, which we wanted to provide, is shown on this map here in green. And based on where the contamination is located, shown in the previous slides, we've identified an exit at 27th Street, and the trucks can go down within the Michael Reese property south to 31st Street and exit onto the Lakeshore Drive frontage roads and ramps to get to I-55. They never actually go onto I-55. There's ramps that are set up the Marshalling Yards is here adjacent that has trucks as well. So it's a good setup to get to I-55. And this way the trucks stay within the internal Michael Reese site. That's our expected truck route. We do have a contingency just in case. We don't expect it, but if for some reason the 31st Street route to Lakeshore Drive is not available, we've shown 2 other potential routes here as well in purple and blue. Those are exiting again at 31st Street and then getting to I-55 via Martin Luther King Drive to the north, or getting to 9094 to the west. And, you know, some of the feedback we have received previously from the advisory committee and others was asking us to evaluate exiting at 26th Street. So we did evaluate that, and it's not an optimal route for one reason. And the main reason is that due to the location of the contamination, it provides a very slim amount of space for the trucks to go around. And as we get deeper into the excavation, it wouldn't be feasible because the trucks, there's just not enough space for the trucks, and they can't, for safety reasons, get in too close proximity to the limit of the excavation. So for that reason, we're still identifying the 27th Street to 31st Street as the primary, with these other 2 routes as alternatives only if needed. In addition, flaggers and safety barriers will be provided for pedestrians that are still going to be accessing the 27th Street Metro Station, which is there at the southeast corner of our site, of the Carnotite site. And if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the Metro Station changes. For the next slide, Prentice. So this here shows the changes to the Metro Station access, not the station itself. Nothing's happening to the station, but this is to the access. So the map here shows currently you can access it in 2 ways: the red route along 26th Street or the yellow route from the south. And once remediation, or prior to remediation beginning, we will be closing the route at 26th and King Drive, so that will no longer be open to pedestrians as it is now, but pedestrians will still be able to access the Metro Station from the south using the yellow path shown. And we will be installing wayfinding signs along that route prior to the closure to help guide people to that location as needed. Next slide. And I believe this is our last slide. So we wanted to just give a very general project timeline here. We're in winter 2020 milestone right now, where we're working to select the remediation contract. As Kimberly mentioned, we put out the bid late last year, and for the contractor to perform the actual construction work. You'll also be seeing utility companies removing or relocating services ahead of time in the next few months as we prepare for the larger remediation project. And in spring 2021, we'll be working with the selected contractor on all those plans and permits that we mentioned previously that need to be reviewed both by us and by IEMA before work can start. We will also be having a public meeting in late April, early May, at which time there'll be additional team members present, and we can provide even more details on both activities and timing. We do expect that the actual field work, so the time where we're going to be out there with trucks and mobilized to the site, to take approximately 13 to 15 months, starting this summer. So it would extend into the following fall of next year. So this concludes the presentation portion. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I am going to ask the first couple of questions, which I think are general, and then I'm going to go to Professor Clark, to Mr. McGee, and any of our advisory committee that has questions that they want to ask live. And then I would ask that anyone else who is a panelist that wants to ask a question live should use your raise your hand function, start your video, because we'd like to see you, and then we will try and call you in order. Prentice, if you can keep track of whose hand is being raised, let us know.
Sure.
Let me know.
Mhm.
And then we will go in that order. So the first question we have is a very general question. It's, how will the city ensure airborne particles will not travel to parking lots and buildings south of the site once remediation begins? In general, how will you contain airborne particles? Are you able to unmute? Abby or Kim? Let's try that.
There we go.
Okay, sorry about
Thanks.
that.
So, the dust mitigation slide that we went over previously, those are the plans and procedures that will be in place by the contractor, the tarping of the trucks, the covering of the stockpiles, the reducing the speeds. Those are all the measures that will be required to, mitigate any dust leaving the site. And in addition, we do have a visible dust trigger. So we have the action levels from the air monitoring. And then also if there's any visible dust too, that's a trigger for the contractor to stop as well and determine necessary requirements. And, like we said, we will have an on-site oversight contractor consultant there the entire time monitoring specifically for these types of things.
Okay. Great. There may be follow-ups to that, but let me ask another question. Will reports of ongoing air tests be shared with Prairie Shores residents, especially residents in the 2801 and 2851 building? How, will there be kind of transparency in that on websites, or how will you share that type of information?
The plan right now is to put it on the website on a regular basis, but I would like feedback, if there is a certain population in those buildings where the website is not going to work for them, we can find another way to get the information. I just need to know if there's a need there for that, and we can work on that. But otherwise, we'll be utilizing some of the lessons learned as far as displaying the data and stuff from the CDPH's website that they put up for Hilco. So we will be making the data available, and it will be in better, easier to understand than what it is now.
Sure. Yeah, there may be a number of elderly folks who may not have immediate access to, websites and the like. So hopefully on this call, we can, or on this Zoom, we can, folks can offer some of the best ways that we can communicate. Obviously we do with building management and things of that nature, but if there are other ways that we can communicate, I'd love to hear some of those ideas as well. So earlier this evening, I talked about our advisory committee. I also saw Mr. Jim Buckner, who's on the advisory committee. He's also on this Zoom as well. But Professor Clark has been specifically keeping us up to breast or making sure, that we have all the information that we need in terms of remediation, and has been very diligent about making sure that the AIS, the department, informs as well. And so, Professor Clark, I'd like to allow you to ask a couple of questions, even if they've been answered for you, just so kind of our general viewers can benefit from the questions and the research that you've done as well.
Thank you very much, Alderman King. I'm a resident of Prairie Shores for practically my whole adult life, decades. I've seen three dust generating activities in the last 10 years or so, from the demolition of Michael Reese, the exit ramps, and the leveling of the Advocate Health Center. All of those generated substantial dust on the cars just north of 2801 King Drive. And almost, I won't say every single morning, but many, many mornings after work had been done, they were covered. We had meetings with Alderman Tony Preckwinkle on the Michael Reese site, which was the biggest, and she was very active and helpful in setting up monitoring activities and agreeing with the city officials, with Prairie Shores, with others to actively pursue these kinds of things. Everybody wants this to go smoothly. We all want the material removed. We desperately need the remediation and done in a safe way. How and why are there likely to be problems? My sense, based on the experience of these three that are right here, and then the three scandals in the spring of last year, which led to the mayor stopping all demolition across the city for 6 months, is the contractors, supervising the contractors. And even if the contractor himself as a leader says we will do this and wants to do it, there are lots of people who may work as truck drivers, as temporary workers, and others who are not fully necessarily as conscientious. And so based on especially the Michael Reese demolition experience, having monitoring and supervising that particular area seems especially critical.
So how can we hold the contractor and everybody accountable? Ms. Worthington, Ms. Mazza?
Well, we get back to that the dust requirement. There can't be any dust, and we're going to have Tetra Tech will be there every day, and the radiation safety officer will be there every day. And then we'll have CDPH and IEMA coming in and out. But part of that is we need to make sure, or they will be preparing a health and safety plan that will cover all of their subcontractors. And that's one of the plans that we'll be reviewing, and IEMA will be reviewing and approving. And, we can make sure that all of their subs have received the right training so that they understand the risks of, what they're doing, because it's not just the community, they're putting themselves more at risk as well. So I think that health and safety plan is key, the regular dust suppression, but I do want to specify that, those activities you mentioned were all demolitions, and this is an excavation. And the closest thing we have to these are the excavations of radioactive waste that we've done in Streeterville. One was DuSable Park, so right along the lakefront and the lakefront trail. Another one was related to the flyover project where we did work. And again, we had an environmental consultant out there making sure things stayed under control. So we know that this model can work for the radioactive waste. If this was a demolition, I think we'd be having a much different discussion, but this is a soil excavation.
Yeah, I'll just mention in my memo, there are 9 points specifically, including continual videos, not one-time photos that one inspector may take, but continual videos so the truck drivers see the video cameras and know everything is being recorded. And then second, having more, if as is stated now, the plan is to go with work up to 20 miles an hour wind. If you're going as high as that, that's very windy. That blows dust all over the place. To specifically construct some type of edifice surrounding and protecting the loading equipment, which is loading stuff onto the trucks. Those look to be obvious things which are not in place at this point.
For that,
And cheap. Everything I've suggested is cheap and simple compared to all of this.
Oh, but you don't know how much it costs the city to do things. But we've discussed the benefits and logistics with our consultant and the radiation safety officer. We also talked to the Department of Procurement and Law, to make sure everything would be okay. But at this time, we don't plan to add video. It wouldn't be just a single camera. Where the work is happening is going to be moving. And we think that, having the phone number and the email notification so we can immediately get feedback from the community, that will help. The additional, are you talking like tarping over the backhoes or what?
But maybe some kind of sort of a fence so that the wind doesn't blow directly 20 miles an hour right onto the truck and right onto the loading equipment, so that the dust blows right off the big shovelful of dirt, which you said in our last meeting a week or so ago is sandy, highly sandy material, will blow easily.
Mm-hmm. So if there is dust coming off, work stops. So the first sign of that, work stops, whether it's 10 miles an hour or 18 or 19. Work is going to stop if we see that dust. And we do, if Abby or one of the people who know our specs, what are we requiring as far as the fence and the enclosure, the specific height? I don't recall.
We have the perimeter fences 6 feet with shade cloth. And then there's additional fence surrounding the excavation area as well.
So we have double fencing with double fabric coverings on them.
I don't know
6
that.
feet awfully low for a truck.
Well, the majority of it, we're digging a hole, but you're right. If they're scooping it up, but if they see dust coming off of that shovel, we're going to have to shut down the job because something's not being done right.
I bet if you just take sand now and put it in a 20-mile-an-hour wind, you're going to see dust immediately. That doesn't take, we don't have to wait till we get uranium dust. Just sand will blow all over the place in 20 miles an hour.
Yep. Can you speak to that, Ms. Worthington? That is.
Well, all I can say is if we see that, we will be shutting down the job and figuring out how to make it stop. Whether it's, Abby talked about some of the items there with the misting and let's see, let me go back to my notes.
So the misting is how you mitigate the particle.
Yeah, the dust. So
and how often is that done again? Can you explain?
It would be done as often as it's needed in order to control the dust.
Here's a follow-up question right into what he's talking about. Because we're not going to get, I don't think you're going to give us an adequate answer right now. When it comes to training, is each trucker who comes on that site being required to have training for this particular site? Is there a specific, yes. Okay, is there a document that you can share with that will be a part of the training and what's it consists of, so we can have some degree of false sense of security?
It's okay. I think I understand your question. You were cutting in and out a little, but it's the health and safety plan, and Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the one that lays out, all of the things that the people who are working on the site need to understand in order to maintain health and safety. And that plan is submitted to IEMA for approval and to the city for approval. So, once we see that plan, we can share it with you.
Okay, and in that plan, I think on a weekly basis, each truck driver should sign and each operator should sign affirming that they understand the requirements. And there should be a written signature. I mean, this is a way of letting people know that they have some liability issues by not following it?
Yeah, we certainly, whenever we're doing health and safety training or any environmental training, we require everyone to sign in and we document that that training was done.
But this is a weekly sign-in, not just when you did your training.
I don't see the advantage of that because
Well,
unless the plan changes, I
no,
can see a refresher.
We're doing that right now with COVID-19. We're making sure that people sign in every day. So it's not something that's unusual. It's a way of tracking to make sure that the person is most currently is acknowledging they're aware of the plan. So if you take what's happened in COVID-19, we've learned that tracking and having people have an accountability by doing that is a reminder when they do that. It's a suggestion.
Okay. Yeah, I think having refresher training is a good idea. And I think we can find a balance in what the right time frame is for that. It is a long project, so having regular reinforcement of the requirements, I think is a good idea. And, especially if we see something where dust is being generated, that might be one of the things we need to do is, go over that health and safety plan again, go over that dust suppression plan again.
And our health and safety plan that you mentioned, Kimberly, it does require sign in every day as part of that.
There
And
we
we'll
go.
have security as well.
Abby, so is that sign in on
In
the
the
site?
thing-
Because the thing is that what Leonard brings up is, it may seem outlandish in some ways, but it's the common norm now. I mean, I have to sign in when I go get my hair cut at my barber. And that's for tracking purposes. So it's not to say it's the same as like signing in to go into a building like after 9/11. It's the same as signing in to go onto the site when they leave. It's the same as signing in to go to any building. So I don't think that's a huge thing of that. They sign in and on there, it acknowledges that they understand the health and safety plan for every truck that comes on the site. I don't think that's a big ask.
Yeah. I would agree. I think, I think norms have changed and I think we've learned a lot and we should incorporate what we've learned. So Mr. McGee, did you have another question?
I did have another question. Will there be sweeping in the paths that you've prescribed, and how often will that be done?
There
I'll
will
let-
be street sweeping. It'll be accordance with the city construction site cleanliness ordinance. As right now, I can't tell you specifically how often, but that's something we will definitely get once the contractor's on board.
Okay, and also in your truck route on slide number 12, you showed a pathway alternative going west on 31st Street between King Drive and the Expressway. That is not a truck route. There is a B plate restriction on that part of the street.
We did run these by CDOT,
There's a
but we
sign,
can go back to them.
Yeah, we'll go back and look.
okay, there is
Thank
a
you.
sign posted as a B plate only between 31st, between King Drive and the Expressway. And that came in with the building of McCormick Place, because when you have trucks that come down that street, it causes oscillation to the building at 3100 South King Drive.
All right, so yeah, so we had run those through CDOT. And, we will double check, and if it is no longer a viable alternative, we will take that off the list.
Okay, the next question I have for you is, when will the hiring posting start? And you don't have to be, but we need to figure, since you're saying that there's gonna be community hiring, it should start as soon as the contractor has a contract and is approved before work starts, I believe. Or I would recommend.
So we're limited with our engagement with the contractor for the procurement process. And so I know they're negotiating the contract right now. And then once that is signed, then AIS will issue the notice to proceed. And at that time, we can have a kickoff meeting with them, get them in touch with Alderman King and start talking about some of those things. But we don't have a date yet as to how long it's going to take the law department and procurement to negotiate that contract.
Okay, within that contract, is there a group charged with doing the community outreach?
In the contract, I know we're doing community outreach and
No,
the
I'm
job
saying-
fairs.
You have you have people who actually specialize in helping get that done. Is that a part of the contract?
We did not specify that. We cannot specify what subs people use. So what we had to do is specify what activities we wanted done and what the deliverables are, what their means and methods are is determined by them. So if they're smart, they will find, these groups. And that's why I think connecting with the alderman soon after award, hopefully we can help them make those connections.
Yeah, we will definitely connect and make sure that there's community outreach. That's definitely a big part of what we do in our community. Mr. McGee, one more question and then we, Ansel has.
The goals that you set on this project, I find them, knowing the construction industry a little bit in Chicago, very low. The goals of 14 and 5 and 3 and 4, I find to be dismal at best, especially when you're moving and hauling with trucks, because there is a lot of capacity in the African-American community to do that kind of work. I think that's an insult to the community.
So I agree with you that there is a lot of capacity for moving dirt, but this is special dirt. And some of the biggest costs we have are for transporting and disposing of the radioactive waste. And there are very few people that have licenses to do that in the country. So we took that into account, and that's why you see a lower number than what we would typically do. But we are certainly striving to do much better than that. But based on how procurement has us calculate these numbers, that's what we arrived at.
Yeah.
We don't have, there isn't an MBE that owns a nuclear disposal site out in Utah. We don't have a minority company where we can take a lower level radioactive waste. So we did quite a bit of research, and procurement helped as well. All I can tell you is we are going to do our best to come in much higher than what we've got. But because the biggest cost is this disposal, it just makes it harder for us to do that.
And my last point would be, as Dr. Terry Clark mentioned, 20 miles an hour wind is a very strong wind. And I would ask that you guys would talk to one of the institutions, maybe IIT, to find out how far 20 mile an hour wind is going to have material drift, so you'll know what the cleanup area will be. And that's something that can be scientifically looked at. I think you need to stay around 3 to 4 miles an hour versus 20 miles an hour or 19 miles an hour. But I would employ, you might want to reach out to IIT or to a university engineer to actually do an experiment with some students and find out 20 miles an hour is a huge speed, and dust will travel.
Sorry, I
Thank
had to
you,
shut.
thank you, Mr. McGee. You got some great questions. Again, another member of the advisory committee, a bunch of really astute folks on the advisory committee on behalf of the community. I just want to say I had that battle with the city about the minority participation numbers. We went round and round. I still, disagree with what the city has presented, and even with the specialty, the other items that are in the contract, I think are items where minorities, especially African Americans, because this is a primarily African American community, have that capacity. So I just want to leave that at that. Mr. Stansel?
Yeah, thank you. I have a bunch of questions, but I would like other people to be able to get in and participate. So I'm just going to rattle them off and let you answer them. But first, let me thank you for giving us the reasoning on why, at least initially, you're thinking of sending the truck certain ways and addressing our concerns of actually trying to use 26th. I understand this now because the actual plume and everything goes out pretty close to that. So that's why, and that you're going to be staging on the southeast part of the site. So thank you for that explanation. So first couple of questions. You mentioned first, I hadn't thought about this, but you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, is this going to be special waste or is there something higher, like with the radioactive waste coming off the site? Just take some notes and then you can just come back to me. Second thing, it was just mentioned in the chat by one of my Pershing alums that why can't you totally cover the site? I would assume that my personal view is that I'm with Mr. Clark, that instead of really covering the site, you would have higher fences. And I really am in camera on the site. They are done cheaply all over the world for when people are building things, of just a live stream of what's going on at the site. So everybody can see it and it's total openness. That is one of the actual key things to have. The other thing that I want to know is that part of the site that you mentioned, that you showed early on, was Prairie Shores property. It's their green space north of there, which many of us, the aldermen included, myself, a few others, that they've lived there, that, we played on that in the 70s, but how does Prairie Shores involved with that, since that's their property? And then the final question and point I'd like to make is, you mentioned trying to access seniors. I have a 93-year-old aunt that lives there. She's lived there in 2801 since 1972. I'm going to tell her what's going on. But in the cases of her and other seniors, she just got her first shot today. They haven't been out. They don't do internet. Yeah, she has an iPad, but there's no freaking way she's going to know what's going on here, except for me. The point is that you're going to have to work with Prairie Shores to just post flyers all over the place in there. I mean, you have lots of seniors there. Like my aunt, they may not leave much unless we take them to the doctor or somewhere. But if you post it, if you work with Prairie Shores, to post it on the doors, to post it in the laundry room, to post it in the elevators, maybe even to just, I mean, it's cheap enough just a flyer under every single door in Prairie Shores. And someone else mentioned in the townhomes on 25th and King Drive, you put a flyer in all their mailboxes. That is the best way to make sure everybody's notified what's going on.
I would agree. And thank you, Mr. Stansel. A number of folks in the chat have mentioned buildings. I asked them to email us, at Ward 04. We can also pass that on to AIS so that we can get an idea of how to flyer those buildings. But that's a great idea. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and we did, to the flyering, the handout that we sent out in 2020, we had developed a radius around the project area and direct mailed to all the individual units. So we can share that area again and see if that's still sufficient or if we need to expand it as well.
Direct mail would be great.
Yeah, that's what we did previously for the flyer. Yeah.
Were those your questions, Mr. Stansel? You wanted the answers, or did you have a couple
No,
more?
I just put it out so they could write the notes down and just answer them, so we don't have a back and forth, so other people can actually get in.
Okay, so if you could answer his questions and then we'll move on to other folks.
It's like speed answering, speed
Yes.
questions. I like it. Okay. Yes, there are a variety of types of waste that will be coming off of this site. We've got regular construction demolition debris, which is clean dirt. We've got special waste. And then we have low level radioactive waste. And then we have a higher level, and I'm sure Chris or Abby or someone on the call can tell me the exact name of what that upper level is that has to go to this facility out in Utah. There's only like 2 places in the country that will take it. So yes, we have a lot of different things going on out there, a lot of different regulatory frameworks. I don't think we have any haz waste. I know we do have an underground storage tank out there that we have to deal with, that's smack dab in the middle of all of it. But I think it was just a fuel tank of some kind. So that would just be a special waste. Totally covering the site, you're talking about like a hoop house kind of thing. That's something we have discussed, and it's my understanding that it creates then a contaminated item that we have to dispose of that is quite costly. And so as long as we can do the dust control with the methodology that we've got here, we think we can avoid that extra substantial cost, because I believe that would have to go out to Utah as well. So we have thought about it and we ruled that out. The camera, we did look at it. I don't know, the city's website is not as easy to get stuff onto as YouTube, and we're not allowed to use a lot of those platforms. So, we would have to do some more talking with our IT folks. We know you guys are all out there with cameras and iPhones, and send it all in. Let us know you're seeing something. We can give you the number so that you can do that. And we will look at more trying to see about the cameras and what that cost would be. And whether or not we can even do a live stream through the city's website. We might have to do it through another platform, but we can look into that a little more for you.
Was that it, Mr. Stansel, for your questions?
There's a
No,
question.
then he talked about the green space.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
Prairie Shores involvement.
Yeah, and actually that green space, Abby, wasn't that actually owned by the city?
Yeah, the green space just north of the parking lot is part of the Michael Reese property that the city now owns.
Oh,
It was, I
So
think,
the-
open
so-
to the public when it was a
Okay.
hospital campus. I think they made it available, but it was purchased and it's fenced in right now as part of the general Michael Reese fencing too. And
Okay.
as some of the beginning slides kind of went to that the contamination is, near surface or below surface level. So, it's not right at the surface from an exposure standpoint.
We were
Okay.
very glad to not find radioactive material in that green space because we knew that it was used by a lot of kids. We did find other contamination there, which is, typical of anywhere in the city.
right.
Lead, arsenic, barbecue grill stuff. So we did find that, but we did not find radioactive waste there.
Thank you.
Oh, and we talked about the elderly, so I think we'll do direct mail on that. That'll be a good way to get the word out.
With lots of flyers within the building too.
Thank you, Mr. Stansel. Moving on, we've got some questions that have come up in the chat. Again, if you're on the participant, if you're a panelist, please raise your hand if you've got questions so you can ask them directly. While we're waiting for you to raise your hand, there are some questions that have come up in the chat. I will try not to repeat ones that have already been answered. Isn't the 31st Street Bridge over the IC tracks due for rebuilding? Will that cause any traffic issues because of construction?
We are aware of that construction project. We have talked with CDOT about it. There will be a lane available for the trucks that we will be running throughout the project. So there should not be any disruption to us using the 31st Street Bridge due to CDOT construction.
We confirmed load limits as well during that duration too.
As a follow-up, I see somebody just put in the chat, what is the plan for the traffic pattern 31st east to Lakeshore Drive during and after the development?
I'm sorry, I looked at something else. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, just what is the plan for the traffic pattern? Can you repeat that from 31st to Lakeshore Drive?
Abby, do you want to go over that?
Sure. So they'd be exiting out of the Michael Reese site at 31st and Lake Park, which is just west of the railroad tracks there, and then going right over 31st Street Bridge onto Lakeshore Drive ramps. So they're on 31st Street for a very short amount of time before getting onto the ramp.
Okay. Is this affecting our health right now? I assume that's somebody who's, lives in the area and wants to know if the Carnotite is affecting them right now. As Mr. Stansel referred to earlier, I used to live in the 2801 building, and I've asked the same question, because I've played tennis, rolled in the dirt, played on the basketball court over there. That's probably not there. I'm dating myself, but yeah. So is this affecting folks right now?
So there were the 3 different agencies that came out at 3 different times and determined that there was no risk to people, mainly because of the type, the low level radioactive waste. I did get clarification that that's the only kind. We don't have the high level radioactive waste. It's all low level. And it doesn't take much to shield people from that material. So it's only like an inch of soil. And Glenn is probably emailing me exactly what it is, but if I'm totally off, speak up. But it has very little shielding. Certainly the tennis court shielded it, basketball court shielded it, and just a little bit of grass would also take care of it. So I think we even had USCPA out there with their fun van, which has a scanner in the van driving around on the site. And it's not until you start excavating that you start opening up exposure. And that's what the concern is that 20, 50 years ago from now, when maybe I'm not working at the city, we need to make sure that we'd like to just get it out of there so we don't have to worry about remembering to tell people it's there before they dig, like we do in Streeterville, because that's what we've had to do there, because we can't go dig that up. We have a rare opportunity here to just go and get rid of this stuff.
Right. So to answer the question directly, it shouldn't be impacting people's health now.
No.
It's kind of like, asbestos, if it's covered and not exposed, not in the air, airborne, it won't impact you. Would that be a correct statement?
Now, if you were out there digging little holes every day, eating a cup of dirt, we might have to run some numbers on that, but I think normal child's play, being around there, based on what the different agencies said at different times, the scans that they were getting, it was low risk to people.
Okay. Is it possible to report concerns that people have through 311?
They can. I think it will take a long time for it to reach us, because it goes from 311 to a person at AIS, and then it would go to a different person at AIS, and then it would come to me, and then I would send it to the site. So that's why we're trying to find that more direct way with the phone number and an email that will immediately alert us that we can get word out to the field.
So that's something that will supply in the communication through via mail. Then we can also put that out through our office as well.
Right.
Okay.
And the email is already set up, right, Abby? Yeah.
Yeah, if
So-
you have that, we can post that in the chat so people can know right
Mhm.
now.
Yep.
If you can find that for us, I'm going to go on to, I don't think that anyone has raised their hand to ask questions live. So I'm going to continue in the chat with questions. How will the trucks be routed away from the residential homes between 33rd and 31st and Rhodes Avenue? I think you kind of answered that before, but if you want to just repeat the route.
Sure. So the trucks will, they won't be on roads. Yeah, thank you. Perfect. So the exit point of the Carnotite area is just southeast of the tennis courts, where it says remediation site exit entrance at 27th Street. And then that black line, the black dash line there, shows the route that they will take within the Michael Reese site to get to 31st. And then the red line along 31st East to Lakeshore Drive. So they won't be on roads, RHODES roads.
Okay. Let's see. Another traffic question. So what's the expected start date? I know you haven't brought on the contractor, but just, in an ideal situation, when are we expecting to start?
So right now we're hoping to get the contractor on board officially with a notice to proceed by the end of March. And then there will be a couple months before they would actually mobilize to the site, where we're doing the submittals of plans and review and plans and procedures and submitting to IEMA and getting their official okay. We cannot start digging until IEMA tells us we can. They have the ultimate go, no go say in this. So by summer is when we would be targeting to actually be out at the site to start work.
By summer is
Mhm.
kind of a target date. Okay, that's good. Let's see. I think a number of questions have. Where is the waste ultimately going to be disposed?
So we know, that's one thing specific to the contractor, the selected contractor, but that said, we know generally which locations, only certain few, as Kimberly mentioned, can even accept this waste. So we're fairly confident that there's a facility in Utah where it's going to go. That's where the highest levels, it's still low levels, but the highest of our on-site levels would need to go to a radioactive landfill in Utah. And then there are some more local meaning Midwestern in Michigan that can take some of the lower levels that to save some costs on that as well, that are permitted properly to accept that material. So that's where we expect far out west for some, and then some Midwestern, nothing in Illinois for the radiological material.
I'm going to ask a question, and I see Mr. Sidney has a question. Mr. Sidney, if you can turn your video on and prepare to ask your question. But before he does, here's another one. How will the dust be controlled as the trucks drive through the community? We've talked a lot about, the dust around the site. How will it be controlled as the trucks drive through the community?
Sure. So before the trucks leave the site, they will be decontaminated, both a dry decon where you actually brush and look for any visible dirt. We'll have a wheel washer as well. And then the trucks will be tarped by the time they leave the site for the duration of the trip.
So they'll be tarped, you said,
Yeah, the beds, the truck beds where the material's sitting will be covered.
right? And since it's dust, I mean, is it more than just tarps? Because, you know, you see trucks right around, you can see kind of dirt sometimes fall off. Obviously, we wouldn't want this to fall off. So is it capped, or is it just tarps, or can you be more specific?
I believe it is tarps. Someone else, if anyone else on our team wants to chime in, but yeah, I believe it's tarps.
And I don't obviously want you to, you know, guesstimate. If you can find out and get back to us and probably include that communication on, but I would think that it would be something more than tarps. So
I
if you
don't think it's something, we didn't include it in our specs. You know, we said they had to be covered.
Yeah.
But if they have some fancier way of doing it, they're, you know, then they may do it that way.
Kimberly, I think Chris unmuted herself. She wants
Okay.
to add in.
Yes, I just wanted to add that any material, any of the low-level radioactive material that's going to Utah requires that it be placed in zipped, they call IP bags, or sometimes they're called burrito bags, but it would be fully enclosed in these bags before it's placed on the truck.
Thank you for that, because
And Chris is our oversight consultant from Tetra Tech, so they are
yeah, I mean, so thank you, Chris, for jumping in, because, you know, these are radioactive material. We don't want to leave that to bump it off a truck covered with the tarp. So go ahead, Mr. Sidney. You're muted. Let me unmute you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, my single question pertained to security at the site during non-trucking hours.
Good question, Sidney. Yep.
We will have security at the site. And I believe it's 24-hour. I'll need to double check.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Mr. Buckner, you've got a question as well?
Yes. How will the hazardous material be transported from Chicago to Utah?
We expect it to be via truck. Is that what you mean, like truck versus train, or?
Yes.
Yeah, we expect truck.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to look for a couple of more questions, and then we'll look to wrap up in a few minutes here. But I know there have been a couple questions that have come in. Someone said, what is a fancy way to contain radioactive waste? And I think Ms. Schnoes kind of responded to that in the bags. If you want to elaborate on that.
And we can update. Well, you know, I've been taking notes as well. We'll look at our FAQs and make sure that, you know, so all these questions, additional information that's not already there, like this on the trucks, gets incorporated on our website.
Noise pollution. You know, everyone's obviously concentrated on the Carnotite and the effects and impact that can have. How about what type of noise do we expect to have on this site, and how are we mitigating that as well?
There will be, you know, heavy equipment. So that is kind of the nature of the beast. You know, it's not a demo, so there is that benefit. There's not going to be crushing on-site rock crusher or, you know, demo ball. But, you know, we are aware of the noise ordinance, and we'll, you know, work to do the majority of the work within the typical workday hours to avoid the, you know, early hours and evenings as much as we can. That's the main source of mitigation, is the work hours.
Okay. What were the work hours again? I'm sorry, remind me.
I can get them for you. There's prescribed in an ordinance.
Excuse me?
It's specified by city ordinance, what
Yeah.
those hours are.
Can you just let everybody know what
Yeah.
that is? Okay.
I think it's in one of our FAQs in the website. I'm pulling it up.
Yeah, while you're looking at that, I'll go to some other questions. Here's a good one. What are the emergency procedures in place if the truck has an accident en route?
I think, Chris, feel free to chime in on this too. That's going to be one of the plans that the contractor, the transportation contractor is going to develop and submit to us. And one of the requirements, a main requirement of our specs was that the transportation contractor has a decommissioning license so that they are familiar and have the experience and are licensed to manage radiological contamination. So there'll be a transportation and disposal plan that will be submitted by them that'll get reviewed and include procedures like that. Chris, I don't know if there's any specific you know of that you want to add.
No, I think you covered it fairly well. I mean, depending on the level of the waste, there are regulations that dictate plans that are required. But I don't think that any of our waste is of that level. But there is certainly the contractor will be required to prepare such plans and safety procedures.
And we can share those when that's prepared.
Great. Another good question. They've all been really good. Can you ask if the phones and emails that you will give us to communicate with you in case of questions or concerns be monitored 24 hours?
We can make it so it'll come to me, and that's fine. And I'll get a hold of the security person, but we'll be all making ourselves available throughout this whole thing. So we might take shifts on it, but I think it is something that's important enough that, and it's easy enough to keep your phone on and answer any calls if there's any problems that someone's seeing. I'd ask if you just want to know how my day went, that maybe you call during regular hours, but it's okay.
We'll keep that in mind. Good answer. But other than that, we would love for you to have some ring just in case. And then this will be the final question. Then I've just got a couple of statements based on what I've heard. But we're coming up on an hour and a half, and certainly, we'll be back in communication. And before the summer starts, I will commit to also having another community meeting, just to follow up on people's concerns, to follow up on some of the outstanding questions that we have. But a CPS educator, and as a former educator, I'll end with this, wants to know if there's employment for students or college students looking for employment. Do the contractors have any type of community employment requirements? What are some opportunities there?
So there's the general project area requirement, which I believe is 10% of the work hours, and then the typical Chicago resident of 50% of the work hours. And the project area is, the immediate, that's meant to cover the more immediate project area location. And those two job fairs, that we've required, that I think will be a good opportunity.
The project area communities are Armour Square, Douglas, Fuller Park, Grand Boulevard, Kenwood, Oakland, and near South Side. Does that sound right, Alderman?
Mm-hmm. It does. I think you said Douglas. You didn't, I certainly, that would be it. Okay, well, I think we've had a lot of good questions. I hope you feel that you've learned. Mr. McGee, I know is chomping at the bits. I will let you ask your final question, Mr. McGee. And then I have a couple of things that I'd like to state just based on some of the questions that we have. Go ahead, Mr. McGee.
First of all, Alderman, I'd like to tell you, thank you very much for bringing this together. I'd like to thank the people who came in, Kimberly and also Abby. Thank you very much. I do really appreciate it from my perspective and the people who I sometimes represent. This was very fruitful. I like it because no one's leaving mad. Maybe don't have all the answers, but no one yelled or screamed at anyone. And as public servants, I want to tell you, thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. I appreciate that. So a couple things. First of all, again, just to reiterate what Mr. McGee said, thanks everyone to being here, and thank you to all of the residents. The questions were really good. I think we learned a lot. I think, I see Ms. Worthington nodding her head. I'm sure there are things that she's going to take back to her team and reevaluate. Some of the things I'd like to just highlight that I thought were some great suggestions. The camera idea. Cameras cost nothing these days. I think that that's something that we should be able to do if it's not monitored. Just having a camera there, period, I think would be a great idea, but it would be great if it could be monitored. And I think that's a low cost. I saw a lot of folks comment in the comment section, human life is just way more important. And for the price of what it costs to monitor cameras, you can generally, have a nice camera that's attached to your phone for little of nothing. And so I think that that's not a high challenge, to ask for that. The fencing around the site, I think that was a great idea because, high fencing, you see high fencing with tarps on for, construction in the alleyway these days. So we're talking about radioactive material. I would think that that's something that would be standard. Obviously, the posting of the information and the direct mail is something that we would expect because of the, and not just the elderly folks in the community, but other folks who just may not use, social media and to communicate. The air monitoring, I know you mentioned that, but I think that that's something that should happen frequently and often, and I'd like to understand what that frequency is. And the 24-hour security, I know you said you were going to check on that, but I'd like to understand, that is indeed the case. So I would appreciate if you, go back and look at those things again. I've committed to having another meeting as we get closer to this starting, and really just appreciate all of my residents and constituents who came out today, who asked these great questions and jogged, I think even the administration to go back and ask some more questions. So that's the reason we have these. We appreciate you all. We appreciate your time for coming out tonight. And so just want to say thank you and have a safe evening. So thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly and Abby.
Thanks. Abby.
Thank you all.
Thank you to the RAC members as well.
And thanks for being here, Cindy.
Also, thank you, Prentice.
Thank you, Prentice.
Yes. Thank you.
And Alderman.
I love you all. Prentice.
Problem.
All right. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye.